Help, somebody please! The desperate scream cut through the howling wind. Snow lashed against the windshield as headlights sliced through the midnight storm. On a lonely mountain road, a luxury car lay half buried in ice, its engine silent, its windows fogged from the inside. Inside, Emily Grayson, the billionaire's only daughter, was trembling. Her fingers were numb, her breath shallow. The heater had died hours ago, and now the temperature was dropping faster than her hope. She pounded on the window. "Help, please!" But her voice vanished into the storm. No one could hear her. Not up here. Not in this blizzard that had swallowed the world whole. Her phone was dead. Her body was shaking uncontrollably. She whispered to herself, "I'm not going to die here. I can't!" Then, through the blur of snow, a shadow moved. At first, she thought it was a trick of her frozen mind, until a faint light appeared, a flickering flame bobbing closer. A boy emerged, drenched, shivering, his clothes torn, his shoes barely holding together. A homeless kid, maybe 16. His face was pale, but his eyes, fierce, alive. He slammed his fist against the car window, shouting over the storm, "Don't move! I'll get you out." And as Emily's world faded into white, that was the last thing she saw. A poor boy, standing in the blizzard, risking his life to save hers. If you love emotional stories about kindness, compassion, and humanity, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching tales like this one. When Emily Grayson opened her eyes, everything was white. For a terrifying moment, she thought she was dead. But then, the sound of crackling fire reached her ears, and warmth began to creep back into her frozen hands. She blinked, dazed, her vision blurry. A dim orange glow filled a small wooden shack, walls patched with old planks, a flickering lantern hanging crookedly above a broken stove. And then she saw him. The boy, the same one from the storm, sat across from her, his hands wrapped in ragged gloves feeding small twigs into the fire. His hair was soaked, his lips cracked from the cold, but his eyes, they were kind. "You're awake," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "I thought, maybe you wouldn't make it." Emily tried to sit up, her head spinning. Where am I?" "An old cabin," he replied. "It's not much, but it's warm." Her gaze drifted to the corner, a wet blanket, a few cans, a torn backpack. It didn't take long to realize he lived here. You live here," she whispered. He shrugged. "Most nights. Depends on the weather." Something inside her twisted. She had never seen poverty this close before. Not in her world of glass towers, gala dinners, and private jets. "Why did you save me?" she asked softly. He looked at her, really looked, and said, "Because no one deserves to die alone." The words hung in the air, simple yet heavy. Emily lowered her eyes, guilt creeping in. She had grown up surrounded by everything money could buy, yet she couldn't remember the last time she had looked at someone with that kind of raw compassion. As the storm raged outside, the boy stood and placed another log into the fire. "You should rest," he said. "You lost a lot of strength." "What's your name?" she asked. He hesitated for a second before replying, "Ethan." "Ethan," she repeated softly, as though the name itself brought warmth. For the next few hours they barely spoke. Emily watched him, the way he carefully guarded the flame, the quiet dignity in his every movement. There was something pure about him, something real. Later that night, when the wind finally began to calm, Ethan offered her a piece of bread, rough, stale, but all he had. She hesitated, embarrassed. "I can't take that," she murmured. "Then you'll starve," he said plainly, pushing it toward her. "I've been hungrier before." She looked at him, this boy who had nothing, offering everything. And for the first time in her life, she felt something unfamiliar, humility. The firelight flickered against her face, casting shadows that softened her sharp features. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Don't thank me yet. The road's still blocked. When the storm clears, I'll try to get you back to town." Emily looked toward the door. Beyond it lay a world she once ruled, a world that suddenly felt so far away. For now, all that mattered was the warmth of the fire, and the stranger who had given her life back. And as the snow fell silently outside, The billionaire's daughter lay wrapped in the threadbare blanket of a boy who had nothing, and somehow, that nothing felt like everything. The morning came slowly, a pale, uncertain light pushing through the cracks of the cabin walls. Emily stirred beneath the thin blanket, her breath still visible in the cold air. For a fleeting second, she forgot where she was, until her gaze met the boy sitting by the dying embers of the fire. Ethan. He was awake, staring through the frosted window, his shoulders hunched against the chill. His clothes were still damp from the night before, his skin pale, yet he hadn't moved from his spot, keeping watch over her while she slept. "Did you stay up all night?" she asked quietly. He glanced over his shoulder and gave a small smile. "Couldn't sleep. The storm was rough." She pushed herself up, wincing as her body protested. "You should have rested," he shrugged. "You needed the warmth more than I did." Those words, simple, selfless, hit her deeper than she expected. Outside, the storm had calmed, but the world was still buried under thick snow. Ethan opened the door to check the path. The wind rushed in, biting and sharp. The forest beyond looked like a frozen sea, endless and merciless. "We're stuck for now," he said. "But I'll find a way, I promise." Emily nodded, though her heart sank. She had never been stuck before. Her father's wealth could move mountains, literally. But here, surrounded by ice and silence, money meant nothing. Hours passed. They rationed the last bit of food. Half a can of beans, a crust of bread. Ethan insisted she take most of it. She refused, but he just smiled and said, "You'll need strength to yell at me when we walk out of here." She laughed, a small, real laugh. The first in months. By evening, the cabin began to grow colder. The firewood was almost gone. Ethan decided to search for more before nightfall. "I'll go with you," Emily said, grabbing her coat. "No," he said firmly. "It's too dangerous. The snow's deep, and wolves come down sometimes after a storm." "Wolves," she repeated, eyes wide. He nodded with a grin. "Don't worry, they usually go for the slow ones." She glared, pretending to be offended, but couldn't help smiling. "Then you better run fast." The teasing felt strange, light, human, something she hadn't felt in her lonely, controlled life. When he left, the cabin felt impossibly quiet. Emily sat near the dying fire, hugging her knees. Her thoughts drifted to her father, the billionaire tycoon, whose empire stretched across continents, yet whose presence in her life was barely more than an echo. He had always been too busy, too important. She had grown up behind gates, watched by bodyguards, raised by nannies who smiled for paychecks. But none of them had ever looked at her the way Ethan had. Without fear, without expectation, just concern. A noise outside made her jump, heavy footsteps crunching in the snow. "Ethan," she called out. No answer. Her heart began to race. She stood, grabbing the nearest thing she could find, a rusty metal rod by the fireplace. The door creaked open, and there he was, covered in snow, arms full of wood. "Relax," he said, grinning through chattering teeth. "I'm not the wolf." She exhaled, half laughing, half scolding. "Don't ever do that again." He dropped the wood and rubbed his frozen hands. "Well, you're welcome for saving your life." Twice now, they built the fire again, and warmth slowly filled the cabin. But something else began to fill the space too. Something quiet, invisible, yet unmistakable. Connection. They talked late into the night, about everything, about nothing. Ethan told her he had been on his own since he was 12, after his mother died. The city shelters were full, so he had wandered, learned to survive. He picked up odd jobs, fixed things for people, slept wherever he could. "What about your father?" Emily asked. Ethan's eyes dimmed. "Never met him," silence followed. The only sound was the crackling fire. "What about you?" he asked softly. Emily hesitated. "My father's alive, but sometimes I think it'd hurt less if he weren't. At least then, I could stop hoping." Ethan studied her, the girl wrapped in wealth, yet shivering from loneliness. "He doesn't know what he's missing," he said quietly. She met his gaze, and something unspoken passed between them, two broken worlds colliding, finding warmth in each other's cold. The next morning, Ethan tried to fix the old radio in the corner of the shack. "If I can get this working," he said, "maybe someone will hear us." Emily knelt beside him, watching his hands move with careful precision. "You're good at this," he smiled faintly. "When you grow up fixing everything you can't afford to replace, you learn." She watched him in silence, the determination in his face, the strength hidden beneath the hardship, and she thought, this boy deserves more than the world ever gave him. Hours turned into days. The storm cleared, but the roads were still impassable. Each night they shared stories, laughter, silence. Sometimes Emily would catch him looking at her, not with pity, not with awe, but with something pure. One night, as the fire crackled low, Emily whispered, "When we get back, you should come with me." He blinked. "To your world? Yes, my father can help you. You saved my life. You deserve a real home." Ethan's smile faded. "People like me don't fit in your world, Emily." "Then I'll make a place," she said. He shook his head gently. "You don't understand. In your world, I'm just a reminder of what everyone wants to forget exists." She looked at him, eyes glistening. "Then they don't deserve you." Before he could reply, a faint sound echoed outside. An engine. Headlights flickered through the trees. Emily gasped, rushing to the window. "It's a search team!" she cried. Ethan stood behind her, silent. Relief washed over her, but his face told another story. When the rescuers burst through the door, Emily turned to him, grabbing his hand. "Come with me," she pleaded. He pulled his hand away, shaking his head. "Go. You have a life waiting for you." Her voice broke. "You are part of that life now." But before she could say more, they pulled her away, wrapping her in blankets, leading her out. She turned back, shouting over the wind, "Ethan! Promise me you'll find me." He just stood there in the snow, thin, silent, fading into the white, until she disappeared into the night. As the helicopter lifted off, Emily looked down through the window. The cabin grew smaller, the firelight dimmer, until it vanished completely. But in her heart, she knew that light would never go out. The city never felt this quiet before. A week had passed since the rescue, a blur of flashing lights, interviews and doctors who called her lucky. Emily Grayson was home again, wrapped in silk sheets, surrounded by warmth, and watched by people who spoke to her like she was made of glass. But every time she closed her eyes, she didn't see her father. She saw him, the boy in the storm, the boy who had nothing and still gave her everything. "Ethan," she whispered to the ceiling of her vast, empty room. The name still felt sacred on her tongue. Her father, Richard Grayson, the billionaire magnate of Grayson Industries, had made sure every news outlet knew his daughter had survived. Cameras flashed, headlines screamed, "Billionaire's daughter rescued from deadly blizzard," but not one mentioned the nameless boy who'd saved her life. When Emily tried to tell them about him, about Ethan, her father had waved it off. "Sweetheart, you were delirious. There's no record of anyone else out there." But she knew. She remembered the warmth of the fire, the softness of his voice, the way he'd looked at her, like she was a person, not a possession. One night, as snow fell gently over the city, Emily slipped out of the mansion. No guards, no driver, just her, and the memory that refused to let her sleep. She found herself walking through the old part of town. Narrow streets, broken lamps, and silence thick with stories no one wanted to hear. Her designer boots crunched over ice as she followed the map she'd drawn from memory. Finally, she reached it. The cabin, or what was left of it. The roof had caved in. The windows were shattered. The fire pit, where they'd once shared laughter and warmth, was nothing but ash. Her heart clenched. "Ethan," she called softly. No answer. She stepped inside, brushing snow off her coat, her breath trembling. The smell of burnt wood and decay filled the air. He was gone. She fell to her knees, tears spilling freely. "You promised," she whispered. "You said you'd find me." The wind answered her, cold, indifferent. And then, a voice. "Emily." She froze. Slowly she turned. There he was, standing in the doorway, thinner than before, his face pale and tired. But his eyes, those same fierce, gentle eyes. "Ethan," her voice cracked as she rushed to him. "You're alive," he smiled weakly. "You came back." She threw her arms around him, trembling. "Of course I did. You saved me. You think I'd just forget that?" He pulled away slightly, looking down. "You shouldn't be here. This isn't your world. Stop saying that, she said, her voice breaking. You are my world now, he shook his head. Emily, after they took you, I tried to reach you. I went to the hospital, to your home. The guards chased me off. They said people like me don't belong there. Her chest tightened with anger. I'll make them listen, he smiled sadly. You can't change the world with kindness, Emily. Her eyes glistened. No, but maybe we can start with one person. Before he could reply, the sound of engines broke through the quiet. Black cars pulling up the hill. Emily turned, heart pounding. Her father stepped out, surrounded by guards, fury etched across his face. Emily, he barked. What are you doing here? I've been searching for you all night. She stood her ground. I came to see him. Richard's eyes narrowed at Ethan. Him? This is the boy you've been talking about. The vagrant who supposedly saved you. He did save me, Emily shot back. I'm alive because of him, her father scoffed. You're being dramatic. You were delusional from hypothermia. Ethan stood silently, his fists clenched, every muscle tense. Sir, he said softly, I don't want trouble. She was freezing to death. Richard cut him off. Don't speak to me. He turned to his men. Get my daughter in the car. Dad, stop, Emily cried, stepping in front of Ethan. He risked his life for me. The least you can do is thank him. Richard's face hardened. You have no idea what you're doing. This boy isn't your fairy tale hero. He's a homeless nobody who wants your sympathy. And my money. Ethan flinched, but said nothing. Emily's eyes filled with tears. You think everyone's after your money. That's why no one loves you anymore. The words hung in the air. Sharp, dangerous, true. Richard's face went pale. Enough, he hissed. Get in the car, Emily shook her head. No, not until you look him in the eyes and see what I see. Richard's jaw tightened. I see a thief, something in Ethan snapped. His voice, quiet until now, came out strong. Steady. I never wanted anything from you, he said. When I found her, I didn't even know her name. I didn't save a billionaire's daughter. I saved a girl who was crying for help. Silence. Only the wind moved. Emily turned to her father, tears streaming down her face. Can't you see? That's what makes him more human than any of us. For a moment, just a heartbeat, Richard faltered. His gaze shifted between them, between the boy in rags and the daughter who had never defied him before, and in that flicker of hesitation, he saw it, the fire, the sincerity, the truth. But pride was a stubborn thing. He looked away. We're leaving, Emily's voice trembled. Then I'm not coming with you, Richard froze. What did you say? You heard me, she whispered. I'm staying. The guards moved closer. Ethan stepped in front of her instinctively. Don't touch her, he warned. Richard's face turned red with rage. You think you can protect her? You're nothing. Ethan met his gaze, unshaken. Maybe, but I'd rather be nothing than a man who can't see what's right in front of him. For a moment, it looked like Richard might hit him, but instead he turned sharply and stormed back to the car. Fine, he said coldly. If she wants to freeze to death again, so be it. The cars roared away, leaving nothing but silence, and snow swirling in their wake. Emily's breath trembled. You didn't have to stand up to him. Ethan smiled faintly. Someone had to. She laughed through her tears, collapsing against him. You're crazy. He wrapped his arms around her, his voice soft. So are you. They stayed like that. Two broken souls in the middle of nowhere, holding on to the only warmth that truly mattered. Days later, something extraordinary happened. A video surfaced online, taken by one of the search crew members the night Emily was rescued. It showed Ethan carrying her through the storm, shielding her with his body, whispering to keep her awake. The footage spread like wildfire. Within hours, the internet was on fire. Headlines read, "The homeless boy who saved a billionaire's daughter." Meet the real hero of the blizzard. Richard Grayson couldn't ignore it anymore. Cameras hounded him for statements. His silence spoke volumes. Finally, one evening, he arrived at the cabin again. No guards, no cars. Just him. Ethan and Emily stood outside, stunned. Richard approached slowly. His voice was quiet, heavy. I saw the video. Ethan said nothing. Richard took a deep breath. I owe you an apology and a thank you. Ethan shook his head. You don't owe me anything. Richard looked at his daughter, her eyes soft, full of forgiveness. Maybe I owe both of you. He reached into his coat and handed Ethan a folded document. There's a job waiting for you, a real one. No charity, you've earned it. Ethan hesitated. then accepted it silently. Richard turned to Emily. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm glad you found someone who reminds you what love looks like. Emily's eyes glistened. Maybe you can learn too. Dad. For the first time in years, he smiled. Faint, but real. And as the snow began to fall again, soft, gentle, forgiving, Ethan looked at Emily and whispered, Guess we both found our way home. She smiled back. No, Ethan, you gave me mine. The storm had brought them together. But love, quiet, stubborn and true, kept them there. The snow had finally stopped. For the first time in months, the sky over Grayson Ridge glowed with a faint golden hue, the kind of light that made even broken things look whole again. The storm that had once swallowed everything now rested like a memory, frozen in time. Emily stood on the porch of the rebuilt cabin, wrapped in a thick wool coat. The same place that had once been her prison of fear had turned into her sanctuary of peace. The fire inside crackled softly, its reflection dancing on the frosted window. Behind her, the sound of boots crunched over snow. Ethan. His hair was still wild, his hands still rough from work, but there was something new in his eyes, a quiet certainty, the kind that comes from finally being seen. You're early, she teased, turning with a smile. He shrugged. Couldn't sleep. The city lights are too loud, Emily laughed softly. You'll get used to it. You're a city man now. He shook his head, stepping closer. No, I'm just a man who happened to meet the right girl in the wrong storm. Her chest warmed. And what happens now? He looked around. At the trees, the quiet, the faint hum of life returning to the land. Now, we build something that lasts. She smiled, brushing a snowflake from his hair. You mean this cabin? He chuckled. No, us. For a moment, silence hung between them. Not the empty kind, but the peaceful kind that only two hearts can understand. Inside, the fireplace crackled. A pot of soup simmered on the stove. Everything was simple, and for the first time in her life, simplicity felt like luxury. Then, a familiar sound echoed from the distance, the hum of an approaching car. Emily turned, brows furrowed. Ethan followed her gaze. Expecting someone? She shook her head. No. Moments later, a black sedan rolled up the snowy path, and from it stepped Richard Grayson. Gone was the arrogance. Gone was the coldness. The man standing before them looked smaller, humbled, human. He carried no guards, no briefcase, no armor of pride, just a worn leather bag slung over his shoulder. Dad? Emily whispered. He nodded slowly. I was nearby for business. Thought I'd stop by, if that's okay. Ethan stepped back slightly, unsure. Richard's eyes met his, not with contempt, but with gratitude. You kept her alive when I couldn't even keep her safe. I'll never forget that. Ethan nodded respectfully. You don't owe me anything, sir. I did what anyone would do. Richard's lips twitched into a faint smile. That's where you're wrong, son. Most wouldn't. He turned to his daughter. I read your foundation proposal, Emily. The second chance shelter. It's good work. Her eyes widened. You actually read it? He nodded. Every word. She smiled, her voice trembling. I want to build a place where no one ever feels invisible again. Where people like Ethan can start over. Richard looked at Ethan, then back at her. Then let's build it together. For a long moment, Emily just stared, as if seeing her father for the first time. Not the billionaire, not the perfectionist, just a man trying to make things right. She stepped forward and hugged him tightly. For the first time since her mother's death, he hugged her back. Ethan stood quietly, watching, a faint smile playing on his lips. When Richard finally pulled away, his voice was softer. You were right, Emily. Love changes people. He glanced at Ethan, even the stubborn ones. Then he handed her a folded paper. Consider this the first donation to your foundation. Emily opened it, her eyes widened. Dad, this is $1 million. He smiled faintly. A small start. Use it well. Tears welled in her eyes. Thank you. Richard placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder before leaving. Take care of her, son. She's got her mother's heart. Ethan nodded. I will, sir. As the car disappeared down the snowy road, Emily leaned against Ethan's shoulder. Did that really just happen? He smiled. Guess miracles don't always come with thunder. Sometimes they just show up in black sedans. She laughed softly, tears glistening in her eyes. Do you ever think about that night? Ethan looked out toward the horizon, where the snow met the sun, every day. Not because of the storm, but because that's the night I finally felt alive. Emily turned to face him, her breath fogging in the cold. You saved me that night, Ethan, but I think maybe you saved him too. He tilted his head, smiling. Maybe we all saved each other. They stood there as the sun broke through the clouds, golden light spilling across the frozen landscape. The cabin's windows glowed, the air alive with the soft crackle of fire and hope. A new world, born not from wealth or power, but from kindness, courage, and a single, unthinkable act, Emily whispered, almost to herself. You know, sometimes the cold doesn't kill you. Sometimes it shows you who'll walk through it with you. Ethan looked at her, eyes soft. Then I'll walk through all of it, as long as it's with you. And as the snow melted under the morning sun, they stepped inside together, leaving behind a world of storms and stepping into one built on warmth, love, and second chances. Because sometimes the richest hearts are the ones that once had nothing at all,